because at the end of the day, good metabolism means taking the energy from our food and turning it's like an energy conversion into the energy that our cells need. So good metabolism, more ATP, more energy for our cells to function, turn energy back on, turn functions back on throughout the body. And so in the bioenergetic lens, like good metabolism equals proper carbohydrate oxidation.
Insulin sensitivity is viewed as a proxy for how well your cells are able to produce energy. The less insulin sensitive you are, the less efficient your cells are. We believe, from the Gilbert-Ling, Ray Peat style point of view, that largely in a bottom-up perspective, that like if you have healthy cells, efficient cells that are able to produce as much energy as they desire, everything else upstream of that will be healthy, versus a top-down approach of like, let's fix the stomach, let's fix your eyes, let's do this.
Welcome back to the Rooted in Resilience podcast. Today we are again joined by our good friends Kathleen and Tyler, and we are going to talk about restoring metabolic health. So I think everyone listening understands that the metabolic health of Americans is not good. Most people have metabolic problems, and we'll kind of dive into what our definition of metabolic health is, because I think that honestly, there's a difference in what good metabolism is between a bioenergetic lens and a more low carb lens. And we kind of view the situation a little bit differently. So we'll talk about our approach, because at the end of the day, you have to do something, right? If your metabolic health is not good, you can't just keep doing what you're doing and expect it to be fixed. So you have to take some sort of strategic approach to get out of it. So we're going to be talking about what our approach is, what we implement in Transform, and the successes that we've seen both in our personal lives and also for the various individuals who have gone through Transform this year and how they've restored metabolic health. And spoiler alert, metabolic problems are not caused by carbohydrates, and avoiding carbohydrates doesn't fix the problem. It's just a Band-Aid. I like to say that if you broke your leg and you stop going to the gym to lift lower body exercises, you wouldn't really be in pain. But the goal is to go back to the gym and lift with your lower body. And so you have to fix the broken leg so that you can go back to working out at the gym. So I think a good place to start would be what is good metabolic health? Because the word metabolism and metabolic health and metabolic flexibility is thrown out there, and I don't think that most people understand what it actually means. So Kathleen, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think a good way, the way that I look at metabolic health, a lot of it definitely comes from Dr. Gilbert-Ling, and I would also say, of course, Dr. Ray Peat as well, but for sure, Dr. Gilbert-Ling and the way that he looked at, health literally coming from the energy production of the body. And so I would basically say it's basically an integrated ability of an organism, so in this case, the human, our bodies, to efficiently regulate our energy production, not only production, but also utilization and storage across multiple systems. So this would be, cellular, endocrine, so hormones, neurotransmitters, cardiovascular, hepatic, which would be obviously the liver, and then, adipose tissue, so fat. And then in a way that we have a homeostasis, a dynamic equilibrium, because we're not a static equilibrium. If anything, static equilibrium is death, torpor. And then, or not torpor, but, oh my goodness, what is it called? What is it called when the body seizes up? Muscles seize up. Yeah, rigor. Sorry, rigor. So when you're basically in a state of rigor, thank you, Tyler. And doing all these things without requiring any kind of compensatory or pathological mechanism in order to do that. So like, for example, what would be considered pathological? Dr. AP always talked about someone being in a feeling like they're in a high energy state, but it's really more of an excitotoxic state versus a true, I don't want to say clean energy because that kind of like creates moral qualms and stuff like that, but like a true high energy resting metabolic states. That's something that Dr. Gilbert-Ling talked about all the time, is this high energy resting state. So basically, are you primed to do something? And then once you do something, how quickly and without compensation are you able to return back to that homeostatic point without causing damage, right? Because we should be able to swing the pendulum all over the place, but when we're swinging the pendulum, it should not cause damage and a over compensatory reaction to swinging the pendulum. So that's how I would view metabolic health.
I think that this is like the hot take of the bioenergetic space is the definition of metabolic health is proper utilization of carbohydrates. And I don't think people kind of understand this, but there are two ways that carbohydrates can kind of be burned. It's very simplified, right? But a proper metabolic health is the proper utilization of carbohydrates. So when carbs come in, you can either turn them like it can just be used for glycolysis, which is this shortcut energy pathway. But the most ideal state is that the energy from those carbs are brought into the mitochondria and go all the way to oxidative phosphorylation, so oxidative metabolism. And the truth is, most people don't do that. And so they don't feel good when their body's relying more on this glycolysis pathway. Whereas if we restore proper carbohydrate metabolism, then we can get full oxidative metabolism, get the most amount of ATP, cellular energy from our food, and the least amount of harmful byproducts. Because at the end of the day, good metabolism means taking the energy from our food and turning it's like an energy conversion into the energy that our cells need. So good metabolism, more ATP, more energy for our cells to function, turn energy back on, turn functions back on throughout the body. And so in the bioenergetic lens, like good metabolism equals proper carbohydrate oxidation. And
really fast, just to emphasize that. So when we're talking about glycolysis, all glucose is going to go through glycolysis, but we want to, like Ash said, we want that pyruvate to then enter the citric acid cycle versus to go to lactate. And a lot of people, they're not necessarily just sending to lactate, but maybe they get into the citric acid cycle, but then they stop at one of the metabolites, like they stop at citrate, for example, or oxaloacetate or whatever. So they're not able to actually continue to convert to that food. That's where the micronutrients come in. And then I also think that we would all agree that protein and fat are just as important as carbohydrates, but like the reason why we're focused on carbohydrates so much is because everyone, well, not everyone, but so many people have been completely railing against carbohydrates. And so we need to bring it back into the fold of like, this is part of the conversation as well. And I also say, like, I understand that the kind of definition that I gave was a little bit more like academic. And so like practically, like, what does this look like? It looks like everything that we talk about, reproduction, sexual health and desire, sleep, the fact that you can like get up and go and run with your children, right? And you're not like, I just have to sit down, I have no energy to do this. All of those
digestion.
Digestion, right? All of those things that you desire to do. And so I think this is why we've talked about this before, but right, it's so important that the individual define like, what does health look like for you? And then sticking to that, because that can really help, safeguard you almost against like everything that's on social media and everything that influencers say and stuff. Because it's like, if you're maintaining and hitting your definition of health, then you don't need to like go out and like try to find something else wrong with you and stuff, because it's like you're meeting your standard for yourself. And so being okay with that and realizing that like certain standards for yourself are going to require certain actions, more or less actions, and again, being okay with that and doing those actions if that's your goal. But if that's not your goal, then doing the actions that bring you closer to your actual goal and stuff. And then last thing, I also think too, it's really important that not every single day is going to be 100%. And so I personally think aiming for like 80% or so of time meeting that definition of health is really great. And just not catastrophizing, ruminating, etc. on those days that your health is not where you expect it to be, because that then seems to lead to like a nocebo downward spiral, like all of this stuff. And so that, that's the other thing too, is that like not every day is going to look the same. Again, dynamic equilibrium, and it's okay that not every day looks the same.
Yeah. So I think it's helpful to kind of start at a baseline of, every time you scroll on social media, YouTube, you see these hot topics of like metabolic function, mitochondria health, metabolism. And so I think if we can group together on like what are common things that people are told right now as like blanket statements. And then Sarah and I used to believe a lot of things. So if we can kind of start there and then instead present, well, actually, this is our approach and what we take and why we believe in this two-pronged approach and transform to restore proper metabolic health. I think that that will be a good way to kind of show that our approach is a little bit different than what a lot of people think out there. And so I know personally, I've seen that people still believe that carbohydrates cause insulin resistance, like they're the reason for it. And in order to become insulin sensitive, you have to avoid carbohydrates. But what's kind of the other messaging that's out there?
Can I just sum up everything that we just discussed real quick?
You go.
Okay. So basically, we believe, or insulin sensitivity is viewed as a proxy for how well your cells are able to produce energy. The less insulin sensitive you are, the less efficient your cells are. We believe, from a Gilbert Ling, Ray Peat style point of view, that largely in a bottom up perspective, that like if you have healthy cells, efficient cells that are able to produce as much energy as they desire, everything else upstream of that will be healthy, versus a top down approach of like, let's fix the stomach, let's fix your eyes, let's do this, which we also, integrate. I do think it's important to have both sides, but that I think is like the essence of like the bioenergetic point of view, that it's a bottom up approach. Don't try to solve the problem of individual cell energy production, and that will pay back in dividends for the rest of the body.
It's
exactly. The rising type of cell boats idea.
Fix the internal environment and things take care of themselves, rather than like, I'm going to focus on my heart, my liver, my gut. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Tyler.
So I think back to Ashley's question, that I think a lot of people are like, well, a lot of people are clearly scared of carbs. And that's because there's a lot of messaging out there today that carbs create insulin resistance, the inability to efficiently burn energy, to create energy. And which this isn't exact definitions. I'm kind of paraphrasing and summarizing a bunch of different things. But that's the opposite of what we have all found. That the more carbs you eat, essentially, the more insulin sensitive you get, assuming you're not gaining weight. You need to be at the same weight, because generally gaining more weight creates less insulin sensitivity or more insulin resistance.
Yeah, and I would also add to that too, not only the carb factor, but the micronutrient factors. So in Transform, during our first phase, the first month, we kind of focus on calories. The second month, we really focus in on the macros. And then the third month, we really focus in on the micros as we're building, slowly building up people's calories. And the micronutrients are crucially important for, again, making sure all those metabolites are going where they need to go, because the enzymes require those micronutrients in order for them to function. And, we continue to, something that I see all the time, especially with the functional medicine side of things, is, okay, you have XYZ issue, Tyler put up a really great discussion that we did about the trace minerals. And so you can see, I discussed, okay, if you have a subclinical zinc deficiency, for example, these might be some of the symptoms that you get. And so people are like, okay, I have a straight up zinc deficiency or subclinical zinc deficiency, just for example. And so I'm going to supplement zinc. And it's like, why? Or the functional medicine doctor is like, supplement zinc and B12 and this huge stack where people end up paying thousands of dollars on supplements and all that stuff. And it's like, why is that the first go-to instead of, hey, what foods am I already currently eating that are high in zinc? And you can see this if you use Chronometer and the NCCDB listing. And the USDA listing is starting to include more of this stuff as well. But we continue to find that NCCDB is most complete. But again, it's not completely complete. I also understand these are theoretical. There's a lot of nuance here, but it's you haven't even looked at what foods am I eating that, are high in zinc. Can I eat more of them? If I'm eating no foods high in zinc, can I add in foods high in zinc? And then not only am I getting the benefit of the foods that, have high zinc, but they probably are high in B12 and, B2 and some of, iron, potentially copper, some of these other things too. And so you're hitting multiple birds with one stone, essentially. And again, rising tide lifts all boats, you're rising all these things together versus let me just try to attack singular micronutrients with supplements and stuff. So that's one of the big things that I've seen. And this has a huge impact on metabolic health. Like, for example, there's so many case studies of someone that's iron deficient with type 2 diabetes. They resolve the iron deficiency, their type 2 diabetes goes away, right? And that makes sense from like the Bohr-Haldane effect, for example. So the micronutrients is one side. The other side, for sure, and something that is a big part of Transform that I think we all love, is the training side and actually putting on muscle mass. It's amazing how when you get into a solid hypertrophy program, and again, nothing against strength or anything like that, but we're looking for specific effects, and building more muscle, and that's why we prioritize that in Transform, allows us to become more quote unquote carbohydrate sensitive, insulin sensitive, but also fat sensitive, amino acid sensitive, all of this stuff. And then we also include the zone 2 kind of lower intensity cardio domain, and then the higher intensity sprints, if you want to sprint, or just like higher intensity domain as well, because of their impacts on things like AMPK, the glucose transporters, all of that stuff, and then just their positive impacts on the mitochondria and stuff too. All of these things coming together, plus the sunlight that we include, plus the focus on sleep that we include, like all of these things really continue to drive one towards quote unquote metabolic flexibility, being able to have carbohydrates, all of that. So
Kathleen just did a good job summarizing, like, instead of taking this macronutrient or this specific food is the problem, it's completely changing the lens of, okay, what are the metabolic breaks in your system that isn't allowing your body to efficiently use that fuel? Because at the end of the day, the whole goal is to take the energy and the fuel from the food that we're consuming and make it robustly be turned into ATP. If there are breaks in the way, which could include like inactivity, low muscle mass, micronutrient deficiency, because those micronutrients are needed to convert that energy into ATP, looking at it in a more holistic lens of what's currently lacking, what can we improve on your day-to-day habits and your day-to-day choices that can help improve that energy generation pathway, which then by definition improves metabolism. So it's a much more like freeing and empowering mindset, rather than like carbs are bad, carbs are the problem for your metabolic issues. So I know personally, when Sarah and I were keto and fasting, I believed that metabolic flexibility meant that you had to go long periods of time without eating, because if you didn't, your fat burning wouldn't be turned back on. And then I also believed that if you consumed carbohydrates, that hurt your ability to burn fat. And I was so like, I just believe these blanket statements so much that, I mean, Sarah and I did low carb for, I don't know, 2 years, fasting for a year. We did fasted workouts in the morning and OMAD, and ate large meals at the end of the day. So like all the things that people say improve metabolic flexibility, low carb, like we did them all. Sarah, do you want to touch on any of those memories?
Yeah, we were just very misguided, but that's because there's very strong voices on the other side of this discussion who, they can pull up all their studies, but they're just isolated studies. We can find a study for pretty much anything at this point. And so you can convince somebody to try anything. And so we were pretty darn convinced that in order to be metabolically healthy, we had to fast and we had to be low carb, zero carb, really. Why not take it to the extreme? So I think at that point, because that's what we believed, we completely ignored any biofeedback and how we were actually feeling. And if I would have taken a step back, this was 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago at this point now, and like actually assessed how I was doing and my symptoms, I would have recognized I am not metabolically healthy. There's a lot of things off, going wrong. But because I feel thinner, if you're going to fast, you're going to eat low carb, you're going to lose a lot of water weight. You're going to be, if you don't have food taking up space in your stomach because you're fasting, sure, you're not going to be bloated, but that's because there's no food mass there and you need food to survive, Sarah. So I was looking at the wrong things that I was believing like, oh, I'm thin, so therefore I'm metabolically healthy. I'm not holding a ton of extra fat, so therefore I'm metabolically healthy. But these are not the true things to look at. In the beginning, you guys already discussed this, digestion, libido, warmth, appetite, being hungry. These kind of things are true ways to measure, are you metabolically healthy? Are you producing energy efficiently? So everything we were doing, Ashley, was just based on, we were following the research, right? Like everybody that we listened to, we thought were just like the smartest people in the world, just basically quoting and saying all these studies. Not to mention they were all men. I feel like that might be an important component, because a lot of these studies are done on men, and then you can't just stamp that and apply it to females as well. But yeah, so you can always say, well, this is what the research says, or, this is what this study says. But when you actually take a step back and assess how you're actually doing, maybe you'll see a different picture. And so, yeah, I'd say that this knowledge and this camp of people who believe that in order to be, insulin sensitive and metabolically healthy, you can't be eating a lot of carbs, that's always going to exist. And I feel like people only get to the place that we're at through crashing and burning and then trying something different and seeing how much better your life can be. And unfortunately, that's the case. And that's why we're so loud about all this and transform and stuff, because we're trying to give people to skip that step of having to go down this path. And then one other thing that I don't feel like we've touched on that's kind of related to being insulin sensitive, or developing insulin resistance rather, is the amount of stress that your body's under. And when you are doing all of these different health hacks, like you're fasting, you're eating 1 meal a day, you're going so low carb, it's not matching your energy demands. Let's say you're lifting in the gym and you're not eating carbs, you're under a ton of stress. And that is also not helping in regard to becoming insulin sensitive. So in my experience, to sum this all up, I started to handle carbs tremendously better and had my metabolism switch turned back on. When I lowered my fats, I even lowered my protein a little bit, and I raised my carbohydrates so my body could properly utilize the carbs that I was eating. And that is when I started to feel like a lot of the different processes, my digestion, my sleep, everything started to improve. So if you would have told me that when I was really deep in the weeds of believing that, low carb and fasting was the way to go, I would have just absolutely said you're wrong. I believe I remember crying when I ate a squash for the first time when I was low carb, because there's such a strong fear element to this all when you're that deep into it.
Sarah, was a crooked neck squash. I remember that day very vividly.
Yeah, I was. I mean, like,
We
I
had
was
our first
scared.
carb in a long time.
Yeah, and it's so unfortunate because that's all just strongly misguided. And I mean, I think you can go so far in the other direction too, and just like be so deathly afraid of fats and protein. Like you can go in any direction, but you really have to recognize, and this again is what we strongly teach and promote and transform, is like the foundations, and how, like Kathleen already said, hitting your let's start with tracking your calories, then let's see where your protein's at, and then let's hit all your micronutrients. So we're making sure that your body has what it needs to utilize the energy, the food that you're eating properly. So I think that's like probably the most important place for somebody to start. And then when we get to that point of assessing and tracking all that, we can tweak the macronutrients to allow somebody's body to potentially better utilize carbs if needed, if we're not already strength training and stuff. So that was my experience with it all. And it took me a long time to get to the place that I'm at now. But Transform only reinforced all of this for me because I've seen my body succeed. I've seen my body shift and change positively through 3 rounds of Transform now. So that's more than I could say about what I was doing in the past when I was basically starving my body with no carbohydrates.
Real quick on the messaging that's in the low carb space in how to fix metabolism is they bring up often that people who are overweight have high levels of blood sugar, but they leave out that it's well documented in the literature that obese people have high levels of free fatty acids as well. It is a fuel utilization problem.
Yeah, it's literally
right?
everything.
It's
Everything's
all all the fuel is just left in their bloodstream because it's not being used. It's not carbs. There's also high levels of fat in their blood as well. And that gets kind of left out. And that's something I didn't understand in the past, right? And so instead of saying, well, carbs are the problem, it's wait, why is the food that you're consuming not being utilized by your cells? That's where we need to restore metabolic function.
I have just an experience with that. I remember we had, I believe we were using CGMs, and this was when we were kind of coming out of carnivore and like experimenting, we're dabbling with carbs. And I ate like a high fat meal with a sweet potato, and I tracked my blood sugar, and it was just like skyrocket high. And that to me was proof that like, oh, carbs are bad again. Like this is what happened. I ate the sweet potato, and my blood sugar skyrocketed. But like again, if you're eating a meal with 50 grams of fat at the same time, not to mention you've been eating high fat for a year or more before that, like your body isn't going to magically be able to utilize the sweet potato that you just ate perfectly. And also, like, I think that this is a whole other discussion we could have, but like your blood sugar is supposed to rise after you eat. But yeah, that's another thing that people are doing, is doing the CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors, and kind of freaking themselves out. And then so like they don't want any spikes, so then they're just avoiding carbs in general.
Well, it's funny you say that, because usually people will say, okay, if you have more fat, it will slow the blood glucose rise. But in your experience, it's not the case. And like, I almost think it's like your body is like, I have been without glucose for so long. I'm going to absorb this as quickly as possible, regardless of what's going on with the fat and stuff. So yeah.
But Kathleen, like to me, at that time, like I guess 6 or 7 years ago, I thought that like it shouldn't spike at all. It should have just been level. Like, oh my goodness, what just happened? And in hindsight, like the reaction that my body had very well might have been normal. To me in my brain, I'm like, oh, it was a bad experience. I didn't think I did well with the sweet potato. But in hindsight, you're right. Like my body probably utilized it right away. And then if I would have tracked a few hours later, everything would have been back to normal. But I freaked out because that's just kind of the messaging right now, is we shouldn't be spiking our blood glucose. We shouldn't see any ups and downs in that. And I mean, like that's just, nobody should be tracking that unless you're diabetic and have a medical reason to be tracking it. Like I don't think that we all need continuous glucose monitors anymore. But yeah, that's another thing that I've seen as far as in the social media noise of this all, is people encouraging people to start getting continuous glucose monitors and micromanaging it, which is stressful in itself.
It became a really not good thing for me. Like it led to a lot of it led to a lot of mental stress and focusing on the wrong variables.
Yeah.
But I think it's clear there are a lot of people out there that do have metabolic problems, and so you have to do something, and you can't just, now you hear, oh, carbohydrates are good, they're going to help me improve my insulin resistance and actually become insulin sensitive. Let me just add bread to my breakfast. Let me add sweet potatoes to my lunch. And it's like you're adding carbs on top of a very high fat, high calorie diet. That's not a good idea. So Kathleen and Tyler, let's outline the transform approach and what you guys have seen with the 200 plus people that have gone through it so far. Because you have to take some strategy, you have to take some approach, because what one is doing right now isn't working. So in general, I think that unfortunately a lot of people separate the two, nutrition and exercise, but with transform we do both, because we think that yields the best results in terms of metabolic restoration. So do you guys want to walk us through the general steps?
Yeah. So here is the overarching issue, I think. Everyone wants a golden bullet, and there's as Hormozy says, I gotta get that podcast, there's 1,000 silver BBs. And it's not the carbs, it's not the insulin, the blue light, it's not the PUFAs, it's not the the amount of time you're spending on the couch. It's all of it. It is it's everything. And when you blame one thing, you just continue to look as like, this is my saving grace, this is the thing. And I'll give like a running analogy real quick. So like in sprinting versus marathons, the faster you go, the more tendon dominant it is. So like how springy your tendons are, the amount of force they can bounce back and forth. versus marathons, small fraction of it is how springy your tendons are. It's mostly metabolic, like how efficient are your cells versus how like springy are your tendons. It does make a huge, if you have a 10% increase or 10% of it is tendons for marathon runners, that can make a huge difference if you have not trained that quality at all. If any of us can get a 10% increase in any of our main lifts, we like tomorrow, we'd all be like, hell yeah, like that would be insane. That would be the biggest increase we've seen in years. And
Ever?
this is what, yeah, this is why people like do this, because they go to the blue light and they get a huge increase, and then they go, oh, it's the PUFAs, and they cut out the PUFAs, and a lot of times they're clockwise adding these things and they're seeing big benefits from it. But you need to do all of it, and a lot of times like there's the missing piece right now, which might change when you go keto. The missing piece may have been, I don't know, you were lacking like vitamin A, or you were lacking, your diet was just horrible, so you feel a lot better. And then you created another problem, and so you went pro-metabolic and you added a lot of carbs and you feel better, but then you're fat because you added a lot of carbs without reducing the fat. And you just run in this hamster wheel, which is why the whole essence of Transform is like the rising tide lifts all boats. You're not missing anything, but you are probably missing a lot of many things. You do need to like foundationally improve.
But Tyler,
Yeah.
I don't want to do it all. I just want to do one thing. But no, that's it. It's a good point though, because people are honestly exhausted, right? They're tired, they're frustrated, they're so sick of this. They just want that one thing. And that's why it's beneficial. You don't have to use Transform, but using some sort of program that does take care of the intentional plan, because you need a plan out. And like you said, it's not just one thing, it is multitude of things. And that's what the Transform program is outlined to do, so you don't have to think about it. You just got to put in the work, right? You do have to do it and put in the work, but you don't have to second guess anymore, and you can follow the program and the outline.
Well, and I think where the thinking about it comes in is that we want people to learn themselves, and we want you to figure out, what do you objectively do best with? Like Ash, you did a great job talking on the last office hours about how, you might do great with like certain starches, but like I might not do great with those ones, but I do great with other ones that you don't do well with. And same thing with fats, same thing with proteins, like, all of that stuff. And what Tyler was talking about, I think the big issue is that so many of us fall into survivorship bias, self-selection bias, and then just straight up category errors. And like, we're not immune from that either. Like, we very much recognize that, not everyone is going to be right for Transform, and Transform is not going to be right for everyone, and that's okay. And some people, the way that we go about Transform is a much more aggressive short cut versus kind of a long drawn out cut. And we find that works really well for most of the general population, because most of the general population doesn't want to be cutting for like 12, 16 weeks at a, and then we talked about last time, the adherence issue and all this stuff. And so, because of that, that's one of the reasons why. The other big reason why that we continue to talk about is the longer you're at, energy sufficiency, the longer you're actually getting those micronutrients. You're getting, you're putting on muscle mass. You're in a positive nitrogen balance. You're not in a catabolic state, which a cut is inherently a catabolic state, right? A cut is inherently a low energy availability state. Like it's very difficult to get through that, to get away from that. And maybe you could create this like optimal situation where it's like, not catabolic, but then by definition, you're losing tissue. And so by definition, it's catabolic. So like, we're back at square one again, right? We're back at the same category error issue. But some people, they do prefer the slower cuts and stuff. And that's great if that's you. Like, I know personally, I couldn't do that. Like, it never worked out well. Like, I ended up getting
too many gains are left at the table.
Yeah, and like major diet fatigue, because it's like the case of the Mondays where it's like, okay, I'm like so fatigued from constantly trying to cut. And then you just like basically end up in this undereat, overeat cycle. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to fast harder. And then like Sarah said, like I kept trying to fast harder because like carnivore and keto never worked for me. And so yeah, I kept trying to fast harder, and then I then eventually my body was like, I give up, and it broke, like we talked about, essentially. And then from there it was like, okay, we have to rise, quote unquote, like rise from the ashes in a way. And I think the hard thing is meeting someone before they get to that point. And I would just say, like, if you've been in a situation where you've had the case of the Mondays, or you've, removed macronutrients or whatever, like, consider that it's probably more a moderate approach that you need, and not such a extreme swinging approach. And, kind of some practical takeaways that you can look into is like, if you are basically zero carb right now and you're concerned about adding carbs in, really the best time to add carbs in would be right before and right after you lift. So, I would start there. And, if you have GI issues and stuff like that, like we're big fans of the allergy approach, which is basically, a very, very small amount, like 1/16 of a teaspoon. I know that sounds like absurd, but like if you are very reactive to things, like 1/16 of a teaspoon and very slowly build up those foods over time and stuff, like sometimes that's basically what I had to do. Like sometimes that's where you're at, and that's okay. But the really positive thing, and like I think the other really positive thing is like if all of these things sound overwhelming, if it's like overwhelming to think about your sleep and the sunlight and the steps and the lifting and the food and like all of this stuff, like that means you have long runways in all of these different things. And so you're going to see a remarkable change once you get to them. And so it's like, maybe adding all of that stuff at once is too much. We like throw you in the deep end and then it's like, okay, we pull you back and then we're like, okay, here's your floaty. Okay, you can touch the bottom just barely right now. You're back above water, like all of that stuff. And then you go from there in everything. So I definitely with Transform, we for sure meet you where you're at. But you can also, like, if you don't do Transform, you can also meet yourself with where you're at. So, like, maybe right now you do need to focus on, the sleep, because in the Northern Hemisphere, we're headed towards the shortest day of the year currently. And, that's where you're going to get your like big bang for the buck right now. Maybe you're someone else that it's like, oh my goodness, my fat is like 100 grams and I'm a, like 60 kilogram woman, like maybe I need to slowly bring that down over time, back closer to like that 0.8 grams per kilogram of, body mass, things like that. So, I think it's important to, again, meet yourself where you're at, to challenge yourself though, to take small steps ahead versus try to take these big steps ahead and then be completely pushed back to do nothing, which means that you're going to be regressing. Or in the least, find your floors that allow you to stand still. And so that at least you're not like, okay, with the floors, like you might not be improving, but you're not regressing, right? And that's okay. Sometimes there are periods of life, like for example, you have a newborn, or you are like moving across the country, or you got a new job, like whatever it is. Like sometimes we have to default to those floors where it's like, okay, I'm okay with just standing still and not necessarily improving, but at least I'm not regressing, right? And that's the thing, like not having this all or nothing black and white mindset. It's like you can still do the things even when the external circumstances aren't the quote unquote most optimal.
Yeah. So I have written down 8 things that Transform program does to restore metabolic function. Because like what Tyler said, unfortunately, there isn't just one thing. I wish there were. I wish it was. But if you actually want to restore metabolic health and improve metabolic flexibility and improve your metabolism, it does take a number of factors that can be broken down into like nutrition, lifestyle, and exercise. And so you guys add on to this list, but one, more activity with daily steps. Once people start tracking their daily steps, they get a little bit embarrassed about where they're at. Most people are not walking enough. They're not moving enough. Their daily steps are low. Number 2, strength train to build muscle. People are exercising incorrectly or they're not exercising at all. Number 3, macronutrient tweaks. So in Transform, we have a specific macronutrient split that we believe helps restore metabolic function, and it does require lowering your fat slightly. None of us are saying zero fat or very low fat, but it's very eye-opening for many people that come into Transform when they're like, wow, I'm eating 120 grams of fat a day. That's not going to help you restore metabolic function when it comes to like proper carbohydrate burning.
While adding carbs too.
Yeah. And it's, sorry, really fast, even just from a micronutrient standpoint, like again, fats are great, fats are needed, but it's like you really are only getting some fat solubles. And that's even if you're getting fat solubles from those fat sources, which you're not necessarily doing. And so, what about the potassium that like pretty much 95% of Americans are deficient in because they're just not getting enough potassium? What about the B vitamins? Like, all of this stuff. So, fats are great, but it always needs to be in the context of everything else. Just like protein is great, but always in the context of everything else. And same thing with carbohydrates too. So.
Yeah. Number 4, consume carbs. You can't work on something without incorporating them. Number 5, pay attention to the types of fat that you are consuming, because fats really add up very quickly. And also, seed oils, vegetable oils, PUFAs, like paying attention to those things. Number 6, hitting your micronutrient intake and the theoretical RDAs. Most people are not doing that. When they track on Chronometer, they're kind of astonished with how they're not hitting the vitamins and minerals. And number 7.
Oh, sorry, really fast, Ash. Can I just say, when
Yep.
people start doing this and they like have days where they're actually hitting, pretty close to 100% of the theoretical RDAs, like we always get messages from people like astonished, like, oh my goodness, I always have more energy and just feel better on the days that I'm hitting them versus the days that I'm not hitting them. And so again, a practical takeaway: you don't have to join Transform to do that. Like you can do this all completely by yourself.
Yeah.
So focus on that. Like give yourself like a solid 3 months to 6 months of like trying to hit those RDAs every single day, again from food, and try not to do it from fortified food, because like if you put in most like bread products, for example, it's fortified, and so you're kind of getting a skewed view of like what you're actually getting. So yeah.
One day I want to make this will be something fun for us to work on for Transform, is like our own database within Chronometer that we can have people pull from that are like accurate things, like non-fortified flour or things like that. Because Chronometer can get exhausting, hard sometimes with all you type in ground beef and there's like 900 options. And then number 7 is like, I guess, lifestyle choices. So sleep, mindset, getting outside, sunlight, those type of things. So I just wanted to make sure that we wrote those down, because at the end of the day, if someone wanted to do this themselves, they can listen to all of our podcasts. We give you guys all of this information on the podcast. We're throwing it out. This is what we do. But if you want a little bit more guidance and support through it, join Transform. But Kathleen and Tyler, do you guys want to touch in on any of those points and discuss like what you've seen with people that have gone through it?
What was number 8?
You didn't have 8?
Did I say 8? I wrote down 7.
I guess 8 could be just stress in general.
Okay, let's do 7 is sleep, and then 8 is like mindset and stress, and yeah.
We would have had some very angry people if we didn't. I think you said 8.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
It was bothering me a little bit. I was like, did I hear her wrong? I don't know. Yeah. Can I just touch on something really quickly about those 7 to 8 points? None of them were like a specific diet. Like it wasn't like go keto or even go pro-metabolic. Like, yeah, there's some nutrition principles that are discussed, like being mindful of your fats. And, obviously you have to add some carbs in. But in Transform, we don't force anybody to do any sort of specific dietary protocol. As far as like, I receive emails from people all the time, like, do I have to eat, this if I join Transform? Do I have to be following this if I join Transform? And no, like there's many ways to reach your choline goal for the day. There's many ways to reach the amount of, like Kathleen said, potassium in your diet. You don't have to eat bananas or avocados or XYZ. That's the beauty of utilizing Chronometer, is you're putting in all these different foods and you get to see what they're adding up to and what you're short on. And then you can look into that specific nutrient. You're not having to follow low FODMAP or grain free. You're able to find foods that work for you to fulfill all of your RDAs, and then you can see how you feel with that. So I hope that in itself is just empowering, that it's not a set of strict dietary rules that we're asking you to follow. Instead, here's like these foundations, or as Kathleen says, your floors, and you can find your own ways to fit into those, fit those categories. So like my diet looks completely different from Kathleen's. Kathleen's looks different from Tyler's. Like none of us eat the same thing here. And I think that's part of the cool thing in Transform, is you get to see everybody's plates, and they're just so different from yours, but you're all working towards a similar goal and you're all accomplishing it. And that can really help break a lot of the diet dogma that maybe you're struggling with, when you see people winning and succeeding and they're all eating, within these foundations we talk about, different plates.
Yeah, the amount of food freedom that people experience is just always so amazing to see. Yeah. Where it's like, I thought I couldn't eat that, and I'm just so amazed by like how good I feel, my energy and all that stuff, like eating all of this food, like prioritizing, because like and again, I just want to say, like, we're focused on carbohydrates in this podcast discussion right now because that seems to be what the external world is focused on. But in Transform, we are big proponents of protein. You need those amino acids to make enzymes, and so we aim for about 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass. Nuance about lean body mass, total body mass, and personal preference too, like Sarah was saying. And then fats are also important. Like, so many times people will say, like, oh, my digestion feels a little bit off. Like, maybe I'm a little bit more constipated, or like I'm so ravenous after I eat my meals. And in that case, it's like, okay, yeah, we probably need to increase the fats a little bit. And once we do, boom, like, we're right back, we're golden again. Like, we're good chugging along and stuff. And so, and we're always, a lot of people like to throw around the Randall effect. And like, that's the reason why we shouldn't be having, all these macros together at a meal and stuff. But like, digestion rates are occurring all over the place. And so just because you're consuming protein, fat, and carbs together doesn't mean that you're actually absorbing them together at the same rate at the same time. And then also, the Randall effect is talking more about the cell to cell, but like, so like a cell could only be oxidizing like fats at one time versus, and then another time protein, and another time carbohydrates. But cells are constantly using all of these things for other things too, because cells don't only just oxidize things, right? They're building things and making hormones and neurotransmitters and all that stuff too. So I think it's important to remember that.
And right now, as a listener, you are using carbohydrates in your brain while trying to conceptualize all of this, and all your muscles are using fat for fuel at the exact same time.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm in ketosis personally.
Tyler, you dirty dog.
Like, most people always have some base level of ketones even when they're fully fed and stuff like that. Like, it's always ratios, it's always levers. Like, okay, right now I'm about to go into a sprint, so I'm really calling on glucose and phosphocreatine and all this stuff to do that. And so that lever like really goes way up, and the fatty acids are going way down. But then it's like, okay, I'm sleeping, and the fatty acid lever is way up, and everything else is down to a certain ratio and stuff. So I think that's also important to remember, that again, like what we talk about with Transform and like life, the body's never black or white. It's always on a spectrum, right? Like, what are we doing, where and when, and what's organ and why, and all of that stuff. So and with these things, like, again, multiple, okay, maybe the term like multiple birds, one stone isn't necessarily like that great, because we don't want to be killing birds, of course. Like, nod for sure to Sarah, but like Sarah's a bird person, I think.
Where's Pip? Where's Pip?
She's been on my computer this whole time.
I think Ash and I are more cow people, but that's okay. But still, like even with the walking, right? Like, most people, maybe not this time of year because it can be, it's cold most places, but like most people, when they're going to get their steps, not only are they just getting the steps and like the non-exercise activity thermogenesis of walking, but they're also getting the lymph, because the quote unquote lymph doesn't have a pump. And so, part of what we think helps to drive the lymph is walking, right? And the physical pumping and movement. Exactly. You're getting outside in the sunlight, you're getting fresh air, you're allowing your vision to become parasympathetic. You're not stuck, in walls where it's like, because we're stuck confined in walls, our vision is a little bit more sympathetic. And like us just by nature feel a little bit more sympathetic, where when you go outside, your vision can go a little bit more panoramic, and so that puts you in a little bit more of a parasympathetic state. Also, like, if you're around trees and stuff, the chemicals that they're giving off are then interacting with your biology. So anyways, like, there's so many layers of things, right? And so I think it's also really important to remember that that's why the rising tide really lifts all boats, because when you do this, like, these very free, at the beginning, it might seem like it takes a lot of time, but really it doesn't take a lot of time to get 8,000 steps a day, right? It takes, like, depending upon, how quickly you're walking and stuff like that, it can take about 10 minutes to get 1,000 steps. And so you're talking about 80 minutes, right? But you can break that, like, we want you to break that up throughout the day. It's better to break, it seems like that it's better to break that up throughout the day versus to have like just one 80-minute walk and that's it. Like, because again, all of these other benefits that you're getting from walking, not necessarily just the steps themselves. So again, like, doing all these things together, everything lifts together, you get the benefits together, and the entire, like, homeostatic set point or equilibrium set point of your body rises together like a tide. So that I think that's why, we continue to see that all of these systems are beneficially impacted versus, if you go to the doctor and you're like, okay, you have a liver issue and they just focus on the liver, or you have a kidney issue and they just focus on the kidney and stuff like that. And again, no, hit against doctors. Like, I understand the system is just not great nowadays and stuff like that. But we should always be, I think, working on these foundations in addition to those more targeted approaches.
I think we talked about this last time, but if we break down, spend 9 hours a day sleeping, that means about 80 minutes of the 900 minutes that you are awake need to be in transition. So you can't be standing or sitting, which, that's less than 10% of your day. You have to be doing something. It doesn't mean you need to be going for a walk for 80 minutes. It just means you need to be moving around, pacing. And I think what Transform tries to do, what Ashley just described, is I really like this concept right now of GPP, like general physical preparedness, especially as hybrid athletes is becoming really popular.
Hybrid.
We're just talking about hybrid. We're just talking about generally healthy people. Okay, so you can't sit on the couch all day. You have to eat the right amount of food. You have to eat the micronutrients that allow you to process the right amount of food. You have to have good digestion. You have to get outside. You have to have enough muscle mass. You have to manage your stress so you're not like a stress ball. That's just a generally healthy human. And Ashley asked the question, like, what if I only want to do one thing before? It's like, okay, you're probably not going to hit your goals, or assuming your goals are aligned with what we're trying to do and Transform, which is like achieve a somewhat reasonable lean body. That's not for everyone. If you want to be a McDonald's advertisement sitting on the couch watching TV, we are all for that. If that's what your goal is as long as you recognize that, hey, like, I'm my own problem. I'm just want to sit in the couch and eat McDonald's all day. That's fine if you make that decision.
Yeah. And I think it can come off as like harsh, right? But none of us are saying that any of this is easy. Like, Sarah and I have been in the health and wellness space for 15 years, and the amount of mistakes that we have made in that time, that's like one of our whys, right? Is we put so much time, effort, and energy into these things that we thought would move the needle forward. They don't. There's no hacks. There's no quick fixes. And like, the sooner that you accept that, the more mental energy and time and space you can have to actually focus on these major habits. And I think that that's a big problem with the health space these days is I see you, audience, putting in the work. I see you, right? But are you putting in the work in the right areas? And I think that we're missing the mark on a lot of these base foundational things. And if we stop focusing on these little minors, we'll actually have more time, energy, and space to actually move the needle forward with these other things. And so none of us are saying that this is easy. It's not. It's a difficult place to be in. And, there's environmental issues, there's epigenetic issues, but you're not doomed. Your metabolism is never completely broken. That's just false. We've seen it time and time again repair itself. Like, we had Julie and Kelly on the podcast yesterday. Kelly is 54, 53,
55 or 54.
55. And she's been able to turn her metabolism back on, eating more calories than she ever has, lost weight, can move again, isn't in pain. And so, like, it is never too late. It really isn't. But it does have to take conscious work and effort. It does.
Yeah, actually, Julie is a really good example of somebody too who was, I think she said 15 years of low carb or something obscene like that, where she really was, she was under eating during the week. People can go and listen to this podcast that will be released as well, but she's a prime example of somebody who did the low carb and was trying to just, maintain leanness. There was some fear probably of insulin resistance there if she would eat carbs, not to talk for her, but, the motive behind that. And then when she went through Transform, she was walked through a process of slowly increasing her calories, increasing the carbohydrates in her diet. She started to finally see results with things that she was doing, like she's putting on lean muscle. And she actually went through the Transform cut and successfully lost weight, when those 15 years prior, she was restricting calories and carbohydrates, trying to accomplish the same thing, but her body was fighting her. So I think she's also a really great example of just restricting carbohydrates is not the solution that people are looking for. Because if we actually take a step back and we're like, oh, if we're talking about, let's say there's a fear of being insulin resistant here, is that really people's fear, or is people's fear, I don't want to be fat? I don't want to feel uncomfortable in my body. It's not that they're scared of being insulin resistant. It's that people don't want to be fat. And so they think to accomplish that, we're going to cut calories, we're going to cut carbs. But that is getting them further away from the goal of actually being a built, having muscle, having shape, having curves, having energy, because that requires fuel. So Julie's a really great example of that too. I definitely recommend people go listen to their experiences in the podcast. I don't know if it's released before or after this one, but I'm sure that 99% of the people in Transform could probably have a similar experience. I mean, that was my experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the research continues to show that carbohydrates for muscle building are just important. And whether you go in fasted or if you go in under a keto type diet, you don't see as much absolute muscle gain as you do if you are well fueled with carbohydrates. And, people kind of like balk or like are surprised when they hear the goal of like 4 to 10 grams of carbs per kilogram, but it's really 4 to 10. And yes, closer to 10 is more for the endurance athletes and stuff like that. Like no one's saying you have to, if you're 80 kilograms, you have to eat 800 grams of carbs, that's definitely more for the endurance athletes. But even 4, like when people are like, okay, I'm 80 kilograms, 4 grams of carbs, that's 240 grams of carbs. Like, whoa, like a lot of people, they can't even wrap their mind around that, right? But
That's
it's
my
like,
breakfast. I'm just kidding.
That is my
Exactly.
breakfast.
Yeah, probably Tyler's.
Yeah. But and again, the imperative thing is that you don't just jump there overnight, right? Like if you're currently at like 50 grams of carbs, like, consider doing slow macro swaps and, consider adding like 6 grams of carbs a week, basically, which, yes, I understand that's only 24 calories. And in the realm of error when it comes to tracking, you're probably within that. However, after you've done this multiple weeks, you're now out of the realm of error, right? And so I think that's also this, if you've done this, if you've, added 24 calories, so 6 grams of carbs a week, you're now at 240 calories after 10 weeks. And now that becomes actually significantly, significant and stuff like that. So, and I also think that the timeline thing, so many people are like told, okay, you're going to have this quick fix and stuff. And like Lyle McDonald and Brandon DeCruz have talked extensively about this. And I think they've done great about how these like weight loss clinics are like, you're going to lose, 30 pounds in a month or something like that. But what do? They specifically have them not to resistance train. They put them on, like a protein sparing modified fast. So incredibly low calorie, like, 700 calories, for example. And so yes, they're losing weight on the scale, but a significant portion of that is coming from muscle mass, right? And so, do you want, like, does the weight on the scale matter more to you versus your body composition? And like, we keep talking about this, like, but the I think Menno Henselman's like free fat mass index calculator is great for people to see, because it's like, it'll show you, okay, you might have, 30 pounds of fat to lose, but you also have like 30 pounds of muscle to gain, right? And so at the end of the day, your total weight on the scale might be the same, because 30 and 30, right, they cancel out, but your body composition is going to look remarkably different. And it's like, so do you care about that number on the scale, or do you care about what you look like, how your clothes fits, like how you feel, like all of that stuff? And so I think that's the other thing too, is that people are so tied to the number on the scale. But, all the time in Transform, people are like, oh, I looked at my progress pictures and I'm like blown away, like amazed at how much, body recomposition I've had and how much muscle I gained and stuff, and how much better my clothes are fitting, even though, there's only been like maybe a 10-pound change on the scale and stuff. So, and then, back to the timeline piece, it just takes a long time to build muscle. And so we need to set our time horizons closer to like 3 to 5 years versus a month. And I think that's also very difficult for, people to get to.
You're asking somebody to stay consistent for 3 to 5 years, Kathleen.
Well, and then
And
once you're there, you have to continue. Sorry, Tyler, go ahead.
I think that's such a huge component to working with someone else. It could be Transform, it could be anyone, because it's easier to set timelines and to see a coach who's not you and look at you across these timelines and like, this is an appropriate rate of progress. Whereas when you look at yourself, you're just like, well, I'm not there yet. Well, I'm not there yet. Well, I'm not there yet. Mm-hmm. And that is a great way to, just jump ship every 3 weeks or 6 weeks, because you're like, it should be this fast. And you just cannot physically comprehend the amount of work and time it takes. And I'm not saying this is a negative to you. It's a negative. Like, I remember when I first started lifting, I would jump ship every 6 weeks. So I was like, all right, I can't go. I'm not going up in weight anymore. So I must change the exercise. It's like, no, Tyler, like, you actually just like got enough skill to actually use the muscle you had. This is the time that you're going to start actually using all your muscle and building it. But I just didn't know because I had my timelines all not figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hit your neural gains, and then your body's like, okay, now it's time to actually, push it. And then you're like, but I'm not progressing anymore. So let me go to the next exercise, and then I'm going to progress really quickly. But it's like, yeah, but you're probably, of course you're building muscle along the way, but like, are you maximizing the rate of muscle building because you keep program hopping and all that? I just wanted to read this comment on a post in one of our forums from I'm not sure if it's Andrea or Andrea, so I really apologize, Andrea or Andrea. I never know how to say that first name correctly, but she said, it's going to ultimately take 5 to 6 cuts for me, 2.5 to 3 years. I'm 59 and postmenopausal, and it seems that weight loss is so much harder than it was when I was young. Before this program, though, nothing I had done before menopause worked to get rid of the 40 pounds I gained during menopause. I'm now a year into it, 2 cuts. I'm down 15 pounds, and I'm stronger than I've ever been at age 59. I had not been able to lose at all in the years before I started this program. It was a bit frustrating at first to realize fat loss would be at a slower pace than I had hoped. I'm looking at it as a permanent fix, however. The time will pass regardless whether I'm improving my body or not, so I might as well use that time to get as healthy and resilient as possible. What I love about this program is that in between cuts, once my calories get up, I can live my life. I also like that I can eat carbs and realize how much better I feel when I do. We're making real lasting changes to our bodies, a true transformation. And she just posted that today, and I thought that was like such a great way to like really encapsulate like everything that we've been talking about. And I think you should always take every change, every positive change as a win, right? Even if you expected more, even if you thought it was going to come faster, like take it as a win. And also it's really important to shift to like progress goals versus like completion goals. And so many of us have this view of like, okay, I'm not going to be enough or whatever until I see this weight on the scale. But it's like, you already are enough. And I understand that is a very psychologically difficult thing for so many of us. I very much understand that. But, if you were to wake up tomorrow and you were to see the weight on the scale because gravity changed on Earth, for example, like, would you actually be happy? Like, would anything have actually changed? And, so really questioning those thoughts behind it, I think is really important as well. It's not just always the physical, it's definitely always, the mental as well. So.
Wow, Kathleen, that comment hit me hard. You haven't shared that one with us. And
Today.
I think that's like the main thing. And honestly, advice for anyone in the audience, even if you choose to not join Transform, step 1 is realizing quick fixes don't fix things, right? Like if you actually want to restore proper metabolic health, have lasting change, it is going to take some consistency and time. And I think that if you can accept that, then your brain opens up more possibilities that, hey, maybe what I was doing wasn't working and I do need to change my day-to-day habits. I think that that's like step 1. And then step 2 would just be gathering data about yourself, learning more about yourself. What are you currently eating? Track your food on Chronometer. What's your macronutrient composition? Are you eating high carb and high fat? Are you hitting your micronutrients? Do you even know, right? Like that's the benefit of tracking. And then also trying to assess your day-to-day steps, either on your phone. There's like a health app. You can get like pedometers that you can literally just strap onto your clothes and assessing where you're at. And I think that doing those things will really help reframe your mind of where you're currently at and the steps that you need to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and don't shame yourself, right? Like, so you put a pedometer on and you realize you're only doing like 3,000 steps per day. Well, again, that means you have a huge runway there that if you slowly build, I would not go from 3,000 steps to 8,000 steps per day. You slowly build up, add, 500 steps a week or whatever it is for you. But when you get to that 8,000 steps, it's going to be like, oh my goodness, like this is completely different and I feel way better. And, all of these positive effects from doing that. And so, I think, again, it's really important to look at where you are and putting one foot in front of the other versus the destination. Because if we look at the destination, we just get overwhelmed and it's like, oh, I have to do all of these things. How am I going to be able to do all of these things? But, choose one thing, challenge yourself and slowly build up to it versus I'm going to jump to it and then feel miserable because I jumped to it. Or like, especially if you do have a significant amount of weight on your body, jumping to that, you're not going to feel good. Your joints aren't going to feel good, all of that. So like you want to slowly build up to that point and always stay below that threshold of you push too high, too far. Like this is very common in the CFSME world. So chronic fatigue syndrome world, where this idea of pacing and stuff, and pacing, it works in the CFSME world because it works for all of us and we all need to pace. It's just, if you don't have CFSME, you can kind of push a little bit more and do kind of a little bit more at one time and stuff like that. But for most people, they like jump all in and then it's not sustainable. And so you have to, as you're making these changes, the external environment needs to change with you in order for them to become, in order for it to no longer be about like will and like determination. And it's just like, this is just who I am now. We always talk about and transform that, like, you can't go back to what you were doing because you're just going to go back to who you were, right? You were who you were because of what you were doing. And so, you want to slowly make these incremental changes over time to become who you're becoming. And like, we've talked about this before, but allow yourself to grieve the process, right? Like it's important to grieve who you were in order to make space for who you're becoming and stuff. And I think that's also a big missing piece that so many people just don't allow. So it's never just the biochemical, the biophysics, the movements. It's also the psycho-emotional side of things too. And so you have to allow those things to change as you are changing the physical.
It is simple, but not easy.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Tyler, is a concluding remark, what has been your favorite transformation story or like aha moment that you've seen with someone that has gone through Transform?
Put me on the spot for this one. I don't have a general, Kelly's story is pretty awesome, which I have in my podcast.
The community post that you talked about earlier.
That was just Kathleen's.
No, the not recovering from.
Oh, this is my favorite. This is just, this isn't me being facetious, but this is a Tyler comment for sure. My favorite thing is when people from the keto community talk about sugar as if they went to rehab and like got off the sugar. And is this what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like
and
they were addicted to it.
Yeah, and then like they're addicted to the sugar, and then now they're adding more carbs in. They're like, yeah, I'm recovering keto, as if they got dropped off at Olive Garden and like just went to town on breadsticks for a week. So
don't do that.
It is funny. What was that? Don't do that.
I said, don't do that. He's joking.
It is just funny. I do think these things are serious and they can have serious detrimental effects, but also you got to take a step back sometimes and remember that, as much as the sugar might seem addicting or the keto is a problem, it's not that deep. Like you are not getting checked. You're not a drug addict getting checked into rehab where you tore your whole family apart. Olive Garden will accept you any day of the week if you want.
Don't go to Olive Garden. Don't go to Olive Garden.
But yeah, it is just, continuing to do
this podcast was sponsored by Olive Garden.
Continue to do the right things for an indefinite amount of time, and you will almost be guaranteed to get to your results or your goals. The predecessor to excellence is consistency.
Love it.
What's your favorite thing, Binash?
Gosh, I love the Q&A so much because I was messaging Kathleen and Tyler about this last night. It is so fun to be talking to a group of people who have open minds, and that's so rare today. And so I think that that's an amazing thing that we see with people that go through Transform is they accept and realize that what they were doing wasn't working, and so they do open their mind for other possibilities. And when people are in this exploratory mindset, I love that. I want to foster it. I love when people feel empowered and encouraged to take back control and they ask the questions. They ask the science. Like one lady yesterday asked, like, how do you guys get so good at explaining these concepts so that I can explain them to other people in their life? I loved that question. Like that was so, and so I think it's this mindset of, okay, I'm here to learn. I'm here to feel empowered. And that's by far, I love that. Because when we can empower one person, that person will then empower other people in their life. And we can make like such a widespread change. So that's definitely my fave.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we talked about with intuitive eating, where it's like most people have gotten to this place because they were intuitively eating. And so it's like once they learn about themselves, then they can actually do like, informed intuitive eating basically. And so they can be true intuitive eaters because they actually know themselves versus, what they were doing that got them there in the first place.
Yeah.
My actual favorite thing is when people have to buy and upgrade their weightlifting sets, because it's like they didn't even realize like they had one dumbbell or whatever it is, and they're like, hey, like they're coming to the program and their weights are just no longer enough. And I'm like, not only are you admitting the weights are no longer enough, but you are investing yourself into your future. And that to me is like, that hits home. Love it.
That's another mindset shift, and realizing that, hey, 5-pound cardio weights isn't enough to actually change my body, and accepting, progressive overload, adding weights and reps over time, that's what changes my body.
Yeah, and like, okay, sure, maybe the 5 pounds is enough like for bicep curls, but eventually you're going to get the point where like each one of your sets is like 50 reps or, or more in order to get close to failure. And it's like, okay, at that point it's like, okay, we need a more weights. Like you could do it, but you're going to just spend so much time in the process of doing it that it's probably better just to, go buy the 15-pound dumbbell or whatever the next stage is and go that way. I think I have two. My first favorite one is, first of all, I love lifting. Like, lifting has been there since college for me. And then I lost the ability to lift, and, having that ability again, like just something I would never give up, So I love lifting, and I love when I love when people start to love lifting, not just feeling like I have to do this because I know it's important for my health and stuff, but they actually love lifting. That always makes me feel happy, and like them finding, what lifts and the way that they like to lift and stuff, because they don't have to do what we do in Transform for the rest of their life. Like maybe they go into strongman or powerlifting or Olympic lifting, right? But when people find that, like, that always makes me so happy. And then the other thing too is when doing the check-ins, which I love doing check-ins and seeing everyone's check-ins that we do every single week. But hearing like them pointing out their patterns to me before I point out their patterns to them. So they'll be like, yeah, I noticed the, XYZ, and I noticed this last month when I was at this time during ovulation or whatever. So I think this is my pattern. I'm like, yes, like you're knowing yourself, you're getting to know yourself and like what objectively is happening to you and stuff. And so I think those are my two favorite things. And so really fast with check-ins every week. We do a check-in where you basically check in with your coach, and that's when we change your calories and macros, and then we kind of comment about how your week went and anything that's going on in your life, things to kind of help. Like for example, a big one right now, as we're heading into the winter solstice, I keep recommending to people that they try to add in purposeful rest. So not necessarily like a nap, but like an NSDR, a non-sleep deep rest, or like yoga nidra session, legs up the wall, things like that, because we are in this time of year where it's like the more restful time of year. And so you should respect that cycle and try to rest when possible. So Sarah, what has been your favorite?
The moments, or I guess the experiences that people have through Transform when they decide to not cut because they've fallen in love with how they're feeling. They're eating more, they're building muscle. They're, like Kathleen said, they're actually enjoying lifting. They're seeing body composition changes. Their symptoms are reducing, which is something that we don't even focus on at all. It's just a byproduct of, getting all of your systems in place. And so even though they came to Transform thinking that they wanted fat loss, they end up skipping the cut because they love how they feel, and they're changing their body and their life simply by doing all of the foundations that we teach in Transform. So those people, I love that for them. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the conversation as always. And for anyone that is interested in learning about joining Transform, there's a link in the description below. The next group starts December 29th. New year, new me, new habits, new mindsets. Come along and join Transformation for Life to finally restore proper metabolic function for the long haul. And Pip says hello. Sarah and her bird.
Yes, she says hello.
Unfortunately, I can't bring a cow.
Yeah.
I can't bring a cow in here.
I was going to say you should go out to the field and do one in the field next to the cows. I would love to hear them mooing as this.
Yeah. Oh, that'll be good.
That'd
Okay.
be so fun.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye, everyone.